an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Veronica Mars, Season 3, Episode 2, My Big Fat Greek Rush Week. In this episode, Veronica goes undercover in a sorority to try and uncover some wrongdoing, re the rapes on campus, and winds up finding out that maybe these sorority sisters are not as bad as she thought they were. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everybody. I am Natasha. First of all, I want to... I have to send out a lot of thanks this week, but many thanks to Rachel for commissioning this episode and for her flexibility in my scheduling. There has been some upheaval this week, but I'm hoping this means that more people are able to attend. That was my hope upon looking and seeing that there is nobody here right now. Maybe that was a little bit overambitious, but we'll see how things go. This episode, guys, this is a really uncomfortable episode, mostly because of the psychology experiment that was going on. Guys, I really just hate that whole storyline. And I am extremely curious to see how that winds up panning out. First of all, Ryder Strong is here and plays this racist, misogynist, every-ist D-bag. And it's super weird because he looks exactly the way I remember him looking, despite the fact that I'm pretty sure this is well into years, a decade past Boy Meets World, which is when I obviously know him from. Was there a person attracted to men who wasn't into Ryder Strong if they were, a youngin' in that era? He was a cutie pie. But Lord, is he just repellent in this. And every time we went back to this storyline, I was so uncomfortable. And I know that's part of the point, but I also don't know what the bigger point was, because I feel like there has to be one. And I'm not sure what it was. In the end of that episode, Rachel's here. Hi, Rachel. In the end of that episode, the kid who winds up being targeted in particular seems to think that dude is generally a cool person, but he, quote, just likes to win, to which Wallace is understandably okay, if you say so. And I think that maybe in that era, people might have been more willing to give somebody the benefit of the doubt about that stuff. But now that we're in post-Trump, people are a lot more knee-jerky in response and a lot less tolerant. And there really is something to be said for the fact, Rachel says, so I totally watched the wrong episode today. Whoops. So the thing is, I just, first of all, was not raised with certain insults in my vocabulary, and I was not even aware of certain stereotypes either. So there are things this dude says that it took me a minute to even understand what kind of slur or what kind of stereotype he was using, because I didn't even know what he meant. And that is what I mean when I try and people say well, you say things without thinking, or you say things because, and I'm just yeah, but I never say things like that because it's not even in my brain to summon from the data centers to my mouth. You know, people talk about like, well, you know, if you're hanging out with certain people, they'll get drunk and just splurt stuff out. And I'm like, yeah, but that means it's in their brain. That means they're thinking shit already. And I just can't imagine functioning as this kind of person who has these thoughts in the first place, never mind says them, which is horrifying, or doesn't say them because they know other people won't like it, but thinks that other people probably agree with them. They're just too afraid to say it, which is the other thing. And I'm just going to call him Ryder because, you know, Ryder Strong. You're Ryder Strong. I'm not calling you anything else. He, through this episode, just really quickly is able to go to these like awful jokes, awful, just in a way that feels like second nature. It doesn't take any thinking for him to go there. And I maintain that is who he is. And this kid doesn't seem to really appreciate that. He seems to want to give him the benefit of the doubt for reasons I don't fully understand. And I feel like there has to be more going on there than I thought. I could be wrong about that, but it's suspicious to me. But let's back up and talk about the actual main plot of this episode. So we pick up pretty much where we had left off with the roommate who had been raped and then had her head shaved. And it's a pretty awful scene where we have Rebecca, oh my God, you hear me? We have Veronica sitting next to Mac, and Veronica is like, as I predicted, beating herself up over the fact that she walked into the room, the rapist was right there, and she didn't do anything. And she just really can't believe that she was right there and didn't know. Mac, for her part, is like, well, it's not your fault that you thought nothing was going on. I was the one who fucking badmouthed her and told you she was the sluttiest slut that ever slutted. So you assumed that was what was going on when you came in the room. Now, the thing is, when you hear what happened, and there's like the moment later on where fucking Sheriff Lamb, once again, is taking statements. Rebecca says she heard a buzzing. I don't remember that. And I didn't go back to that episode to like listen again to see if I could tell. But Rebecca says she heard a buzzing. And it's clear that she thought it was a vibrator or some sex toy and just left it at that. The roommate is really horrified and says something about how, and I forget the roommate's name. I know you guys have told me that. Forgive me. But the roommate says something like, wow, what kind of a slut do you think I am? Which I found to be a really weird reaction. Was this a thing that people thought, that if you like had a vibrator, you were a slut? Was that a thing? Because that seems to be what she believes Veronica is intimating when she says that. And Veronica doesn't exactly push back too much when she accuses Veronica of implying that, which makes me think that Veronica realizes the truth of what this girl's saying. And it's weird to me because that wasn't the impression that I got. I mean, people use vibrators during sex sometimes. Like, that's a really common thing. And it's sort of funny, but also like so childish the way that they're both reacting to that implication. And I just don't really understand that. Understandably, though, Parker, thank you, Rachel. Parker is upset by the knowledge that Veronica was in the room when this is happening. And while I'm hoping she eventually calms down and realizes that Veronica did not have the information. She didn't walk in and see some dude, like, you know, over her unconscious body. She came into a darkened room and heard some things from people under blankets and assumed what anybody would assume if they walk into a dorm room and hear sounds coming from underneath a blanket in the dark. This is not Veronica's fault. And I get Parker wants to blame somebody, but it's really frustrating to watch her blame Veronica when anybody would have done. I could see Mac like making, like, coming in and sitting there for a while, like just being like, well, I have my work to do, or I need to go to bed. I'm sick of staying outside while she has sex with whoever in the room and always like takes the room over. So I'm just going to sit over here, put my headphones on, and get to studying and ignore what's happening over there. And then eventually Mac winds up in the situation that Veronica does, where her back is turned because she doesn't want to see anything. And she winds up finding out later that it was an assault happening. It was not anything consensual. There's just a way that we learn to cope with trying to deal with private situations in a very impersonal space, like dorm, where you have to share space and be on top of one another, and there's no hiding anything. There's some horror movie, and I can't remember what it was, but she has a roommate, and she comes in and hears noises and thinks that her roommate is having sex because she's walked in on her before, and she doesn't turn the lights on and goes to bed. And when she wakes up in the morning, her roommate is dead, and it turns out that she was being murdered, and that was what she heard. So yeah, it's a pretty emotional opening. Veronica is just really struggling with like feelings of guilt, feelings of helplessness, and the fact that Sheriff Lamb is the one involved in this whole thing in terms of the investigation is really unsettling, because he has the cop response. This girl says she doesn't remember anything. And Lamb's response to that is to say, that's what they always say. Well, here we go, kids. Buckle up, because it's about to get ugly up in this season. We're doing this. So, yeah, this is when Veronica like chimes in and says that she knows around when this happened. This girl screams at her that this is her fault. And then we have the credits, and we cut to Keith. And he is out here with his walking stick and very nearly gets his leg clamped by a goddamn bear trap. And this winds up coming into great. It comes very handy later on. But man, I never even saw it coming, and I fucking should have. I don't know what's the matter with me. He finds this perfect thing. Obviously, he's going to use it and set it up somewhere else. I don't know why I didn't think of it, you guys. I figured he would just leave it there, but he can't guarantee that this guy is going to, like, you know, I'm an idiot. But yeah, this is what he winds up doing, because it's like a bad scene for poor Keith Mars. It is miles out there. It's just empty, and there's not much cover for him. And I was kind of puzzled at the fact that he like gets up on the ridge where the railway tracks are, because I was like, he's going to see you up there, and you have to know that. I know you're smart. Why are you putting yourself in a position where you're in full view? There's no cover out here. You're not hidden behind trees. And then once this dude gets trapped, come to realize that, yeah, he put himself up there to be seen, to lure the dude to the trap. Perfection. And I'm just going to deal with Keith like in one shot, because we get very little of him. He sets the trap. This other dude winds up walking right into it. And then his fucking psycho brother, who we've met before, catches up with him. I'm assuming because of the pen that was in Keith's car. So I don't know if he like tracked him out here or exactly like how he found him there, but it doesn't really matter. He catches up with his brother. We cut from them to Keith and we hear a gunshot. So it's assumed that the dude that killed Kendall and who was trying to kill Keith is now dead. I feel safe assuming that. The other dude, if he had a weapon or not, he did not seem to be in a position to use it, but I could be wrong about that. And I mean, in the end, this dude who killed his brother, I don't know if he's going to come after Keith. Does he have a stake in that? Was that because Vinny's working for him and everybody has to know the Fitzpatricks are bad news. Vinny has to know this dude's trying to track down somebody so that he can kill them. Vinny isn't exactly an above board type guy, right? I don't feel like he's the type that's going to have a problem with working for an employer who's like, no, I'm definitely going to murder this person. However, I do have a hard time thinking that if he thought Keith was going to be put in danger, that he would be okay with that. I feel like Vinny's the kind of dude that's like, I'm willing to mind my own business. And if you want to go after your own people within your own business, that's your business. You do what you need to do. But if you're out here just starting to kill like everybody involved, it's more like a self-preservation thing where I can see Vinny being like, oh, that means that I'm next on the menu and I'm not interested in that at all. Thank you. But no, we are going to get this worked out because this cannot stand. Which I guess, makes sense. But I'm hoping that's the way that he works and that this dude, I get the impression because by the end, Keith goes to police and he tells them there's been a murder. I can tell you where. That this dude went and retraced his steps and he is not interested in Keith. And that is why the crime scene winds up being cleaned up pretty well. But he could just be biding his time. I don't really know how seriously he takes it that Keith was involved in all of this. How much of a loose end he considers Keith to be. So, it all depends. But in the end, like the cops at first are kind of like, yeah, this place looks like nothing happened here. We kind of think you're full of shit. But eventually they do come across a picture frame, I think it is, that has a blood spatter over the frame still that did not get wiped down. So, yeah, they have a tiny bit of evidence that is going to hopefully point them in the direction of believing Keith and starting to investigate this murder. And it's really funny because this guy finds it and his boss says something like, bag it up and send it to the lab. And I'm just like, man, that is the most like trite line. But there are some lines that are just like, that's a trite line because you always have to say it. That's how it works. So let's go back to Intro to Sociology. Everybody has to write a paper about torture, or they have to participate in an experiment about torture. Guys, I don't mind telling you, the teacher is posting images up on the screen as he is talking about this. And it is shit that I know a lot of us have seen before, but oh God, it is so incredibly disturbing, y'all. Torture is the kind of thing that I feel like if you engage in this, there is just something fundamentally wrong and broken in you, and you need to be kept away from people. That's just what I believe. There is something broken. That's it. There is no way. There are plenty of things that I can excuse as being a byproduct of trauma, but torture is the kind of thing where it's not accidental. It's not a side effect. This is you enjoying a thing, and that thing is causing pain in people and humiliating people, and you like it. I can't handle it. And these images were just like so upsetting to me. And it started off basically this entire storyline on a really dark fucking note to me. And it makes me wonder if this is it's almost got me wondering in the way that this goes, whether or not Ryder Strong is going to wind up being the rapist. But he's like new. This is intro to sociology. I think that means he's a freshman, which means that chances are, I mean, there is always a chance that whoever is doing this is an underclassman who manages to sleep with college girls and is doing this. And when I say manages to sleep with college girls, I'm not saying, like, obviously this is rape. It's not the same thing. But I'm feeling like a dude who is underage and who's like trying it on with college girls, unless he manages to pass for a college student, he's going to be noticed. I feel like that would be something that people would remember. And I'm just assuming that this is somebody who is like, who has been in the school. But I'm assuming, that's not a guarantee of any kind. So I just got my eyes out for everybody. And I feel like this whole thing being about torture is really linked with the like humiliation aspect of these rapes, because rape falls right in with torture, where it is something that there is just no excuse for, except that it's one of the few crimes in our society that we can say, well, the temptation was too great to not do it. That's like a genuine fucking argument that people make. The only crime in which we ever act like that's okay, you were just tempted too much. Like, what? But the only exception that I can say, and I really even have a hard time with this, but I can understand people's points, is that the way that we teach boys about consent is so lacking and has been for so long that I can understand sometimes guys not understanding what they're doing is rape. That does not mean that they don't understand what they're doing is wrong. That's not the same thing. They may see it as, well, I know this is kind of fucked up. And they think it as being like, well, I know that was shady. I know I was sort of taking advantage a little bit, but no, it's a rape. You can't use your like minimizing language to change what it is that happened. That's a whole other conversation though. So I think that this goes together. And he asks the class, who here thinks that you would never ever do anything like what's in these pictures? Of all of you who have your hands up, only 2, maybe 3 of you are right. I do not understand. Only 2, maybe 3 of you are right. I can't, guys, I am not a peaceful person, okay? I have a bad temper. I get in wild arguments all the time. I constantly fantasize about being in physical fights with people, like, because I just am so angry that I want an outlet. I am an advocate for violence for change in protesting and overthrowing things. 100%. Torture doesn't fall under that heading for me in any way. I can't imagine how this whole class of people, and there's only like 2 or 3 people that are like, no, I would never. I don't get it. How? You can't, I'm sorry. I don't buy it. I don't buy it. I don't know. I just don't see it. It makes me so physically sick just to see the fucking photo. I just felt like shaky from it, So anyway, we go to Veronica and she is talking to Wallace about what she's going to do to try and help Parker. She is turning her unbearable guilt into steely resolve and going to find the rapist and crucify him. To which I'm like, you know what? I support this. And this is what I mean. I'm like, listen, there comes a point when somebody does something like this and inflicts this kind of like harm where I'm just like, no, it's better if you're not alive. The world is better if you aren't here. I just really do believe that. And this is what I mean when I say I am not a nonviolent person, but I also don't want him like skinned alive and dipped in acid. You know, just execute them. Take them out of the equation. Done. You know? I don't know. Maybe that's just me. And she says that first things first, she has an interview for the newspaper because they pay for photos in college, which I'm like, do they? Because I feel like that is suspect. I mean, I feel like that might have been a product of the early aughts, and nowadays they probably don't. But, you know, correct me if I'm wrong. At this point, the RA comes in, and he is asking whether they've heard about things. He says, I thought that the incident last time would mean that there was like a bit more of a break between that and the next incident. I can't believe something happened again so soon. We wind up finding out later that he is the one that drove Parker back to the dorm in the little like safe ride. I can't remember what it's called, but it's a little like go-kart, golf cart dealie that's supposed to help you get across campus safely. And it's something that I really wish we had had when I was in school. And I hope more campuses do this kind of thing. I said in the previous season, when Veronica comes to campus and this happens, that I suspected Michael Cera of being the rapist because he is so unlikely a suspect to so many people, being as like soft spoken and retiring and nerdy as he is, that a lot of people would never think it. And they picture rapists as being aggressive. They picture rapists as being physically strong. But if you're drugging somebody, you don't need that physical strength. If you don't need to be aggressive to feel an entitlement to women. And so my thought before this even like was revealed was, I wonder if the RA is involved. When it's revealed that he drove her home, my suspicions were kind of allayed, even though they should have been heightened, because I feel like that's too clear a link. And likely, if he had been the one to drug her, it wouldn't have happened on the way to the dorm. Like, I would picture that he plans this out more, but I don't know that to be true. What I'm saying is that I suspected him for a second and then immediately was like, no, now that they're drawing this connection, it feels too obvious. And I don't think that it's him at all after all. Rachel says, not as many people could take newspaper quality photos back then. Nowadays, then maybe don't, because good camera equipment is more readily accessible and even iPhones can take quality enough photos. Yeah, that makes sense, actually, because she's got the really good camera and whatnot. So, yeah, he says that there's a floor meeting tonight, and Wallace says that he can't be there because he's doing the experiment, and this kid was like, oh, I did that once, and it was like a really intense experience. Good luck with it. And he says life-changing and gets kind of weird about it and sort of like walks out of the room with this look on his face. And it was just a really weird moment to me of just being like, shit, what happened to him? So we go to Veronica, who is talking to what I imagine is like one of the editors of the newspaper. I don't remember her name. I don't remember if we're introduced to her, but she has a very petite Halle Berry sort of look to her. That was how I kept thinking of her in my head. And she is giving Veronica the assignment of going undercover as a potential at rush for a sorority. Veronica is very reluctant to do this. She seems to take it a bit as an insult that she will fit right in. It's interesting to me that she reacts this way because in previous seasons, we have seen her affect this exact type of personality 1,000,000 times with no hesitation at all. And I'm really curious what it is that makes her so reticent to do it this time around. I'm kind of guessing the main issue is that when she has pretended to be this kind of person before, it has always been like in response to people outside of school. It has always been her using a different identity to get information out of somebody that does not know her, but that she imagines if she's on campus with these girls, they will eventually get to know her and realize that she was lying. So it's basically don't shit where you eat, right? I'm thinking is sort of what is the crux of her hesitation here, is that she's like, well, I don't want to go undercover with a bunch of people that I'm probably going to run into all the time afterwards. Like, yikes, you know? And it turns out that's precisely true. She's like going to be sort of branded from this episode on as being a bit of a snake. And it's not that her intentions weren't in the right place to begin with, but things happened the way they happened, yo. And I don't think a lot of us would have handled the situation particularly differently if we were in her shoes. So yeah, she is trying to get out of it. They're not hearing it. And the main thing that they want her to find is evidence that these sorority parties are against the school rules, that there is a ton of alcohol. And this woman also says that the rumors are Theta Betas get pledges all liquored up, take them to a secret room, and have them undress while the guys from their brother fraternity watch the show through a two-way mirror. And this is one of those things that, like, I could definitely see happening. I don't know how many of you are familiar with Rush. We had Rush when I was in college, and it was a weird experience because the Carnegie Mellon crew isn't exactly loaded with like what you would picture as being frat and sorority types. Very nerdy crowd. But we still there were wild parties. There was an amazing foam party that I went to that I was just like, that was the best thing that's ever happened. And I heard afterward about some of the hazing stuff that goes on. I didn't see it. I didn't know anybody who was involved in that part of it. I wound up dating a guy who was in a frat for a little while, but we never really talked about it. I never asked about, like, you know, what he went through in order to join. And I'm not sure he would have been allowed to tell me, even if I had asked. But hazing can get really violent. It can get really out of hand. It can be very traumatizing to people. And this sort of thing, as like weird and ridiculous as it sounds, isn't out of the question. I could absolutely see this being a thing that happens. So when she says this, I was kind of like, I don't know, maybe, like, I guess. And also there is a bit of, so those of you who are not familiar with the concept of a pick-me. A pick-me is, forgive me guys, I'm adjusting myself. A pick-me is a term almost always used for women, but it can be used on men also. Usually with men, though, it's called white knighting. A pick-me refers to a woman who says and does whatever she thinks men want to hear or see from her in order to get herself labeled as one of the good women so that men will be interested. And this almost always is a term used on women who specifically throw other women under the bus in order to make themselves look good in front of other men. And it's a really invaluable kind of term that I wish so much I had known when I was younger, because I definitely did the pick me thing, not realizing that's what I was doing. I think all of us probably fell prey to this. And I saw it happening and didn't really understand like why I felt so gross about it. And now I look back and I'm like, oh, clearly I knew they were full of shit. But pygmies can be the type to offer up other women as prey to terrible men. And they basically do this for two reasons. One, they know that they know the men that are predators, and they want to keep themselves safe, and they don't really care about the other women. And two, they want to distance themselves from the type of woman who would be a victim, because they see those women as bringing it upon themselves. So they don't, it's a kind of, they fall prey to the like Madonna whore thing, where they're like, well, a woman who is drunk at a party or who is like willing to do XYZ is obviously a lesser woman than I am. So if they want to go after that type of woman, well, that's really on her. But I am not that type of woman, so I am safe from that kind of behavior. And it's really one of those things that's just, there's a bit of logic that I can kind of understand what they think they're doing there, but it falls apart the minute you look at it more, because first of all, the idea that men will stop with the victims that you determine to be worthy of being mistreated is hilarious. And second of all, what do you think happens to men who prey on other women that way when it's time for them to settle down? They marry pygmies and then begin to treat them that way. You wind up becoming the end, like the goal for these men, and then they get bored and begin to treat you the same way because they used to treat other women this way. It doesn't just go away, that impulse. And it's really painful to watch happen, because you know it's happening, and there's a bit of sympathy because you understand that these women are also a victim of patriarchy, and so you understand their urge to protect themselves from it, but they are doing so at the expense of other women, at the expense of just the general like health of womanhood, and they don't seem to care or have empathy for other people, period. And so it's this awful thing where you're like, I understand that you're struggling with internalized misogyny, and I have been also struggling, and so I feel you, and I know that's hard, but also that's not an excuse to do this kind of shit. So I don't know what to tell you, you know? So anyway, I can't help but see sororities doing this kind of thing and basically being like, well, we know frat boys are predators. We'll let them prey on underclassmen, which will keep us safe, especially if they have been preyed on when they were freshmen. There can be a misplaced anger there towards themselves, towards the frat guys, towards their sorority sisters that they don't know what to do with. And so they wind up directing that anger at the new girls coming in. And it's not their fault, but that's the only place that rage has to go. So they just throw it onto these other girls who don't know what they're walking into, and sort of see it as, well, I went through it. You have to too. And don't see that for like the toxic cycle that it is. So anyway, that's my thoughts on that and why I can absolutely 100% see this as being a real possibility out in the world. I know that there are going to be people who are like, women wouldn't do that to other women. Yeah, they absolutely would. Meanwhile, there's this whole thing with Mac, and she's trying to she doesn't know what to say to Parker, really, is what it comes down to. She wants to be sympathetic, but she doesn't want to fall all over herself to, she doesn't want to pity her and be too demonstrative about it. She doesn't know Parker super well. Also, what do you say to somebody who's been through something like this? Words just start to feel sort of meaningless, So Mac comes into the room and Parker tells her that her parents are going to be coming to get her and she's leaving school, and that her mother said she was too immature to be going away to college. And this winds up being a scene that we see later where her mother comes and picks her up, and she basically blames Parker for her own assault. She basically says, you got into this mess because you are too immature. I warned you, and look what happened. And you can see Mac struggling with like not really knowing what to do or what to say. But finally, she has a moment alone with Parker and she's like, you shouldn't go. I think you should stay. And Parker immediately decides to stay, which is like, it's kind of funny because you could read it as Parker either being really impressionable and just like way too easily influenced, or you could see it as she didn't really want to go, but she didn't know whether anybody believed in her that she could do it, or whether anybody thought that this was like a good idea, you know? And I appreciated that Mac decided to speak up on this and saw how gross Parker's parents were being. I wonder if they'll push back on it at all, but I don't imagine they will. So we have Veronica showing up to Rush. The girl that goes to see her at the door is Haley. Guys, Haley is a practically carbon copy of Kristen Bell. Like, it is hilarious, and I am delighted with this. She even is like wearing her hair in the same way that we saw Veronica wearing her hair in the flashbacks to when back before Lily was murdered. Everything about this look is extremely familiar, and Veronica just looks so much like her, and I just could not stop laughing. And she is coming in to this like what looks like a tea party. Like, all of these girls are wearing floral dresses. There's something real Stepford Wives creepy about it. And they take her purse, and it winds up being, she is not comfortable with this because she's worried that they're going to like, you know, go through her stuff or God knows what. But it turns out that's how they extend invitations for people to return, is they put invitations into their bags. So she comes in, there are people like serving food. There are several teacups to be seen, lemonade. And Veronica came here hoping for like an undercover look at the way this place operates with, in terms of, you know, being lewd and a party house. And there's literally like what would you call there's a quartet, there's a quintet, 6 is a sextet, septet. There's 6 women singing off in the corner, Swing Low, Sweet Chariot. It's really something. This is really funny to me because Veronica walks in here thinking that this is going to be the party. And I'm like, Veronica, this is the daytime initial rush. Of course they're not going to have their boozy party right now. That's for the evening when they've culled the herd a little bit. And sure enough, she winds up getting her invite to come back. They say dress to impress. And she sees that as like a job interview. And I'm like, girl, read the signs. They're having you come back. They gave you like a secret invite. It's at night. They want you to dress like a hoe. Just do it. But she doesn't see it. And I was just like, ugh. You square. But we'll get there in a moment. So this girl is telling Veronica, truth is, we're all incredibly lame, but we're like family. The trade-off is having to wear a matching dress occasionally. And this girl, guys, correct me if I'm wrong, but this girl that she's talking to, does she play Victoria in the first Twilight movie? Because I feel like that's the same actress. I don't like looking this stuff up while I'm watching because I'm always afraid I'm going to get spoiled. But I'm pretty sure that's the same girl. And I was just like, oh my God, it might not be, but I think it is. And yeah, Veronica, you can see being a little bit moved here by how sort of friendly and sweet these girls actually seem to be versus what she expected them to be like. So already there's a bit of hesitation for her now that's different than her initial hesitation. Rachel says it definitely is. I knew it. Haha. So we have the beginning of the experiment where the teacher is explaining to them, the professor, what the conventions are, which they cannot break. Or I guess they could. He says, we'll be nearby to make sure you adhere to them. But a big part of me is just kind of like, Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing, though, is that people don't adhere to that stuff. So if they don't, like, what do you have cameras around? Are you watching all of this? I'm not entirely sure how much supervision is happening here. But he has people step forward according to the numbers of their social security number. And he tells all of them who step forward, one of whom is Wallace, the other whom is Ryder fucking Strong, that they get to be the guards. And everybody else is a prisoner, including Logan. He says, let's go over the rules. Sleep deprivation is okay. Any other kind of physical abuse is not okay. Prisoners are required to get a certain number of calories per day, and to ensure the food isn't inedible, one guard must eat a sample meal before the prisoners are forced to eat theirs. Prisoners are not allowed to use cell phones, computers, or watches. I hope you enjoy writing your paper, says Logan, because he is sure they're going to win, and they almost do. Him and Wallace make a bet that the loser will streak across campus. So I'm going to jump ahead a little bit, but basically Ryder Strong decides that he is going to be the asshole guard. And he claims he's playing a part, but there's a bit too much relish. There is a bit too much like well thought out methodology here for me to give that much credence. First thing he does is tell them to take all of the mattresses out of the room because they're for the guards and the prisoners are going to have to sleep on the floor or on these like bed frames, right? This kid is trying to study because he has a final exam coming up, and they take his books away. And when he protests, Ryder's like, well, tell us the location of the bomb and we'll give you back your books, no problem. There's another kid that has to use the bathroom, and he won't let the kid use the bathroom, and later on the kid pisses his pants. I assume that the fresh pair of pants was from Wallace because he gets a fresh pair and won't tell him where he got them. I think that was probably Wallace. I don't remember if we find out about that or not, but Wallace seems uncomfortable with the way this whole thing is going. And it's one of those things where I'm just like, dude, look, I totally get being like, I have to pee, let me use the bathroom. But once they make it clear they're not going to let you, you find a spot in that room and you piss in that spot. And that's what you do. That's going to be your bathroom now. If they're not letting you use the bathroom, you got to figure something out. Peeing your pants, bad call, man. That is where you live in, is your clothes. Don't do that. I don't know what they would do if they did do that, how the guards would punish them. But, you know, I feel like it might be worth it. And this is when Ryder says, I'm thinking the Jew or the fat chick will crack first. And this is when Wallace is like, dude, what are you doing? And he stops and says, you'd rather be politically correct than prevent hundreds of people from dying? Take it seriously, bro. And that's the thing, is when you're in this kind of work, you can tell yourself any sort of story to justify what you're doing, right? So that's exactly what he winds up like leaning into. And Ryder is just like, I'm just leaning into playing the part. Let's get it done so that we can get the fuck out of here. And he manages to like treat this whole thing in such a way as to be sort of, I mean, he's so offhand in dismissing Wallace that I can understand letting it go, and that you think that, okay, he is just joking around, right? But he gets so into it, you know? So, oh my God, guys, I didn't spot it. I just realized that I missed something because I only got to watch this episode once, but it cut from there to the desert with Keith. I didn't realize that Keith planted that pen. So when I said that I didn't understand how the Fitzpatrick finds his brother, I thought that he like found the location of the cabin and just sort of scoured the area. But I just saw the pen shoved into the ground. So Keith set this whole thing up to distract the guy so that he would walk into the... Ooh, Keith, you smart. I didn't even... Because it's a really quick shot of the pen. So, yeah, I can understand how I missed that, having only watched this the one time. So, I'm running out of time here, but I'm going to jump ahead to the whole thing with Veronica. She goes to this evening party, dressed to impress. She is wearing by far the wrong thing. Somebody talks about like this cutie that they should introduce her to, and it fucking turns out to be Dick. And I was just like, oh God, the worst. And Dick almost blows her cover as being like a private eye right there, but she manages to shut him up. And she notices as she's dancing at one point, this camera over a door in one area. And she's sort of like assuming that camera has something to do with the double glass room, right? The two-way mirror. And gets up on a chair and really starts like shaking her ass in this exaggerated way to try and make herself seem like she's drunker than she is, because she's not drinking at all. She's trying to give them the idea that she is drunk and vulnerable and a good option for whatever it is that they're doing that's shady. Instead, what winds up happening is they come and get her down from the chair and take her outside and tell her that she has had too much to drink and needs to calm down and is on the verge of losing points with some of the sorority sisters. And it's very much not the response that Veronica was expecting. She's thinking they're going to victimize her, and instead they make sure that she gets home safe. So she gets on that like safe ride thing. And the woman driving, I think, right, she says, "You girls get all tarted up, parade right into the belly of the beast, and drink until you can't say no. You're lucky you didn't end up with a shaved head. You should know better. The Greeks are evil." This woman is really doing a victim blaming thing here, and I do not care for it. And also, the Greeks are evil. I mean, I don't know why you think that is specifically who's doing it, other than the overall culture surrounding it. But like, and don't get me wrong, I totally know that fraternities can be super gross about this whole, like 100%, but there's not enough evidence to really say that. And their whole goal, I should mention too, in the first episode, is to get the fraternity shut down. And when I heard that was their goal, I was a little puzzled, because I was just like, whether they're in a frat or not, these dudes are going to continue to rape. That's not the problem. Like, yeah, there's a certain atmosphere and culture of encouragement that can exist in a frat. But if a dude's a rapist, and whether he's in a frat or not, he's going to find out a way to do it. And these girls aren't getting their heads shaved at frat houses. They're getting their heads shaved in their dorm rooms. They're waking up in their own beds like this. So there is really no evidence to support their assertions on this. I understand assuming it's the frats, but having that be your only goal is completely like missing the entire point, in my opinion. So yeah, this girl like initially doesn't even want to believe that Veronica isn't drunk. And then when Veronica convinces her, she just is kind of irritated and stops the car and just tells Veronica to get out. And she winds up popping up a little bit again later. And I was just like, is this girl like, I don't know. I feel like this girl might play a role in, like, is she setting things up? I just got very suspicious of how incredibly, what's the word I want? Vitriolic she got so quickly, you know? So we're going to go back to the psychology experiment really, really quickly. first of all, they make food for these inmates. I guess they make the food themselves and they choose what the inmates are going to get, and they choose particularly gross food just to make them like disgusted. So one of the things they choose is pig knuckles. And this is something that Ryder leans into a lot because the kid that he's been picking on this whole time is kosher. And at one point, he winds up getting put in solitary. And when he comes back, everybody tells him a different address so that when he does cave in the end, it's the wrong, like that felt on purpose to me, right? They separated out the one kid. Oh shit. Was he a ringer? Did they know he was I'm wondering now if Ryder Strong and this kid aren't like sort of in this together. I don't see how that could work, but nevertheless. In any case, they give, like, I noticed that all of them make a big point to tell the kid the wrong address so that later when he caves, he gives them incorrect information, and he intended to give them the right information. This was not a feint, you know? But I found it interesting that that doesn't come up again, that there's no mention later of the fact that he was fed the wrong information on purpose. So I'm not misreading that, I don't think. But regardless, in the end, the way that Wallace and the other girl guard, whose name I don't think we ever hear, they wind up outwitting the prisoners by setting the clock ahead and getting the professor in and making it seem like the experiment is over. And then one of the prisoners blurts out the correct address, and the guards wind up winning because they were incautious. They should have just sat on their information until long after they were out of there. But this kid got cocky and just sort of yelled it, and they wind up losing. And it's a pretty great moment because Wallace wound up like using totally non-violent, non-demeaning tactics in order to get the information that they needed and tricking them. And Logan winds up having to streak naked through class, which is a real moment. Wow. Oh man, streaking is one of those things that I will never understand, but all right then. So back to Veronica, she confronts the TA. He gets very defensive about it, and he says that he didn't know Parker was the one who had gotten raped. He says that Parker, there was another girl who was so out of it that she was the one who needed help getting up the stairs, and Parker helped her get up the stairs rather than, you know, Parker being the one that seemed like she was inebriated and a good target. So this is part of what's making me think like, is like, I assume these girls have actually been raped. And it's not just, oh, I woke up with my head shaved and I assume I was raped, because I assume that they're having rape kits, like, what do they call that? That they're getting assigned a rape kit. Is that the word I want? You know what I'm saying. But what if that's just the head shaving? What if that's all that's happening? I don't know what that would mean. So to speed ahead, the house mother of the sorority that Veronica is pretending to pledge is very friendly. And Veronica keeps on trying to sort of like get some time alone so that she can get a key to this area of the house that has the camera over it. And she notices a security feed on this computer that is focused on the dining room, which I guess is the room that she had been dancing in, and they had cleared the dining room out. She winds up going into that room because she steals the keys out of that drawer, and she finds a grow room full of weed. I mean, it is a big stash of weed. And what she is told is that the house mother had cancer, or she had something going on. I think it was cancer, though, and her chemo left her in a lot of pain. And one of the botany professors supplied her with seeds to plant because the weed was going to be a huge aid with her pain. And it worked. And they decided to grow some so that she could continue to find relief. Now, that's certainly possible. But, I mean, it's a pretty good story, and I'm not sure I totally buy it. There's like a whole thing in the end with Veronica feeling really bad because basically this bust is going to fuck up everything. Like people are going to go to jail. This woman who has like been suffering from cancer is like having to go through hell all over again. It's pretty bad. But I can't help but wonder, was all of that for just the one person? That feels unlikely to me. I don't know if I completely buy this story. Veronica seems really quick to just be like, wow, I'm a terrible person. But I'm like, is that... I don't know, girl. I don't know. Who knows? But regardless, she feels really terrible about having betrayed the trust of these girls who all, by the way, wound up voting for her. And she explains to them about how one of her friends was raped and that she thought there might have been a clue behind that door. And she thought that she was going to be helping this friend. And it turns out that's, she's just hurting other people. So yeah, she has to she tries to stop the article from getting published, but the best she can do is go to the house and warn them that the article is going to be coming out. They won't not publish it, So yeah, this girl is like, what's ironic? You got voted in. We wanted you to be one of us, and winds up slamming the door in her face. So yeah, it's just a pretty sad moment of me being like so suspicious that I still can't accept their story. And then we have the last scene where Veronica's at home and she is talking to her dad and is like, is everything okay? And he tells her, I screwed up real bad and somebody got hurt. And he starts crying. And it's really it's rough, guys. I just hate watching Keith be so sad. I really do. I hate it. But there it is. Many somebodies got hurt, to be honest. Ah, brother. So that's the end of the episode. So thank you, Rachel, very much for commissioning this and for hanging out with me and for being so flexible. I'm sorry about all the confusion. But yeah, from now on, episodes are going to be done in the evening until all of this begins to sort of get back to normal. Who knows how long that will be? Fingers crossed it doesn't take terribly long, but And I hope that you guys are enjoying listening. Yeah, fingers crossed indeed. And I will be seeing you eventually with a new episode. Until then, toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.